The Israelis have launched a major invasion of the Gaza Strip, which is where about half the Palestinians live, specifically focusing on Gaza City. Tanks are involved, artillery is involved. They seem to be deliberately attempting to drive people just to flee the area. And we're seeing more violence now in the last 2 weeks than we have seen at any stage of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, going back to the 1946, 1947, 1948 period when Israel was created in the first place. Allies of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are involved in almost gang activity in various Palestinian territories, more in the West Bank than in the Gaza Strip. And under normal circumstances, this just wouldn't fly. Not only would Israeli society not tolerate it, but you'd see a lot of pushback. We have any number of countries, France, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, who have now recognized Palestine as an independent entity, which from my point of view is completely pointless, because unless you're willing to change the military facts on the ground, none of this really changes anything at all. The only country on the planet that has the ability to militarily intervene in Gaza would be the United States. And when the initial attack by Hamas launched their attack across the border into Israel proper back in October of 2023, more Jews died in a 24-hour period than had died since the Holocaust. You can understand the baseline position that a lot of Israelis are coming from. Israel has been the superior military power in the region for the better part of the last 60 years, at least since the 1973 wars. There hasn't been any force that can stand up to them on the battlefield or in the air, and all that's been left is paramilitary and irregular forces like Hamas, militant groups, Hezbollah. But the Israelis dare not let down their conventional military guard, because while Hezbollah and Hamas are threats, they are irritants compared to, say, if Egypt decided to roll in with 1,000 tanks. We now have a completely different strategic map of the Middle East. The Syrian civil war is over, and the Assad government is gone, and the replacement government, if it can hold together, big if, I wouldn't call it pro-Israeli, but they certainly don't want to fight with Israel. It's more likely they'll fall into a second civil war that will destroy any military capability of the state. And remember, Israel has already done a few thousand bombing ranges to take out pretty much every arsenal and chunk of equipment that they could find. Iraq is no more as a conventional threat because of the Americans. Number 3, Egypt is, if anything, an ally, same with Jordan through peace deals. Libya, which used to be an irritant, has fallen apart. Iran was defanged earlier this year in a series of strikes that didn't simply set the nuclear program back several months, but basically destroyed Iran's ability to defend itself with air defense. The strategic picture for the first time in modern Israel's history is calm, which frees them up to deal with some of the unconventional threats that they've never really cared for. Ergo Gaza. Politics in Israel are wonky. Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the PM, was about to go to prison for bribery and corruption when he was elected last time, and as long as he's the prime minister, he won't go anywhere. So he has a vested interest in making the conflict as hot as possible in order to forge a coalition with the real wackadoos in the Israeli political world who just want to kill everybody who isn't a Jew. And they do not have a vested interest in seeking a peace agreement, even if that was possible. Many of them see that expulsion of the Gazans from the Strip to, say, the Sinai Peninsula isn't even something they want, because they think that the Sinai Peninsula should belong to Israel as well, as long as the West Bank, as long as the East Bank, which includes parts of Jordan, some of them you actually think they should push all the way to Baghdad.
This map, it shows the curse of Iran's terror axis. This axis threatened the peace of the entire world. It threatened the stability of our region and the very existence of my country, Israel. Iran was rapidly developing a massive nuclear weapons program and a massive ballistic missile program. From Gaza, Yahya Sinwar dispatched waves of Hamas terrorists. They stormed into Israel on October 7th and committed acts of unspeakable savagery. In Syria, the murderous dictator Assad hosted Iran's forces, tightening a noose of death around our throats. In Yemen, the Houthis launched ballistic missiles at Israel. We've hammered the Houthis. We crushed the bulk of Hamas's terror machine. We crippled Hezbollah, taking out most of its leaders and much of its weapons arsenal.
They know they can't just erase 2.3 million Gazans, so they have to make life so miserable that someone, somewhere, will take them in, and things have to get a lot worse before a country somewhere around the world is going to bring in a 2 million people with minimal education and no money. Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor now, and he actually knows what he's doing.
We have France, we have the UK, we have Australia and Canada recognizing the Palestinian state.
Well, these countries are doing it, frankly, because of domestic political pressure in their own countries. You know, because of migration policies, their countries have been flooded with foreigners who have become politically active and are insisting that their governments do these sorts of things. And so that's what they're responding to. But look, it's irrelevant. It's going to get a little bit of attention, but there is no Palestinian state. You can put all the, it's kind of an emblematic of what the president says about the UN. You can put out all the paper in the world you want. The only way there's ever going to be a permanent solution to this challenge between Palestinians and Israelis is a negotiated settlement, one in which the Palestinians are going to have a territory and they're going to govern it, but it cannot be one that's going to be used as a launch pad for attacks against Israel. And that's something that has to be negotiated with Israel.
The United States, who would under normal circumstances serve as kind of a connector between Israel and the rest of the world, make sure things don't be too crazy, that's gone. And it's really given the Jerusalem government carte blanche to do whatever it wants. Anti-Americanism is obviously something that's always been in the system, but over the last 20 years, we've seen it become more organized and more conspiracy driven and have better hooks for getting into people's brains. So we've seen reports recently of the most far left, radical, lefty, crazy commie, socialist, whatever word you want to use, aspects of this group that are starting to quote people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Anti-Semitism of various forms that has been around for a long time, but also now is a lot more slick and organized and coherent, and these two things are blending together to make a really powerful narrative that doesn't have to have facts. That's part of the general degradation of information communication we've had across the world in the last 20 years, where facts and figures go out and the narrative is all. That really applies to the situation in every possible way, even before you consider the level of the violence that is going on in Gaza. If there was a solution to the Palestinian situation, we probably would have bumped into it by accident at some point over the last 60 years. There is literally no place for the Gazans to go if they were to be relocated. And as long as they are living in Gaza, they are completely dependent upon food aid from the outside world, which the Israelis can turn on or off at a whim. As a result, we get this, not so much of a stalemate, but this extreme increase of violence by the Israelis against the Gazans. And before you decide that you want to jump on the bandwagon of condemning the Israelis, keep in mind that Hamas is the one that started this. But more than that, Hamas has never, ever had the goal of actually having a two-state solution or a modern independent Palestine. They want a global caliphate where everyone who isn't Islamic is killed. As always with this fight, careful who you condemn. Careful who you cheer for.